In early 2018, I was producing a video series exploring fighting game characters called Violent Profiles. You may have heard of it. There was no buffer. Each episode was ideated, scripted, recorded, edited, and uploaded as I managed to find time, which meant there was nothing in the way of a proper upload schedule. We also didn't have the biggest fan base at the time since the Bloodstorm video hadn't dropped yet, but those who were invested I was very grateful to have, just like today. For some reason, this seems like a good time to remind you guys you can get episodes a month early by subscribing at the $5 tier on Patreon, and that liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing the videos actually does help the channel out. Anyway, also in early 2018, the Game Grumps did a one-off episode of a Super Nintendo fighting game, and wouldn't you know it, a fan of the show requested I cover these bizarre characters. I was determined to deliver, but sitting down to actually play the busted old fighter was proving a difficult task. Never mind the real-life distractions that ultimately terminated the original series entirely. Well, it might have taken over 5 years, but we're finally getting to it. I'm Eric J. Chucky, and welcome to Violent Profiles, where we discuss obscure fighting games and the rosters that define them. Today we're talking about power moves, known to Japanese gamers as Power Athlete, or if you prefer Sega systems, Deadly Moves. We're gonna stick with power moves for simplicity's sake. Developed in 1992 by System Vision, a studio so popular they don't have a Wikipedia page, and published by Kaneko, who are perhaps best known for producing 2 Chester Cheetah licensed games.
It ain't easy being cheesy.
There's not a lot one can really say about what is a painfully obvious Street Fighter II clone released 1 year later, except for talking about how bad it is. Let's start with the jump button. Yes, I said jump button. Instead of just hitting up on the D-pad, one of your face buttons is mapped to jump. Now I know, it's an early fighting game, the rules weren't established yet, and most other games at the time had dedicated jump buttons, I know. But it's still a subpar control scheme within the genre, except for platform fighters like Smash Bros. And a platform fighter, this ain't. Of course, there's a reason there's a dedicated jump button. Pressing up on the D-pad allows you to move a little bit into the background, kind of like a beat-em-up, which could be cool, except that the game isn't really programmed to take advantage of it. Most attacks still hit no matter where you are, and there's so little depth that it's trivial for the opponent to just follow you. So this largely useless depth of field thing causes another deviation from your typical fighting game formula. You have to be able to move back down, so there is a lack of a crouch button. Combine this with the fact that only 3 of your possible 6 buttons do anything, since Deadly Moves was a Genesis title first, and you will discover your attack options are punch, kick, jumping kick, and 2 special moves. Some fighters also get a throw. And as though all that wasn't bad enough, the opponent is invincible after being hit in midair, so you can't even get a few extra follow-up attacks until they get back up. There's also no chip damage, so if your foe decides to stonewall, they just get to. Ordinarily in such a scenario, in almost any other fighting game, I'd just throw them. But Joe here only seems to throw people when he really feels like it. Now I know what you're thinking. I self-identify as not very good at fighting games. That's why this show is about the characters more than the mechanics. But here I am talking my fool head off about the mechanics. Why? Well, for 2 reasons. 1, the story mode concerns Joe and only Joe, both in the sense that you can't play as anyone else, and also that his name is solely Joe. Not Joe Black, not Joe Green, not Joe Higashi, not Joe Usler or Joe Bruce, not Sniper Joe, not Mighty Joe Young, not even friggin' Joe Jonas. Just Joe. So the details we have on the other characters are very minimal. Joe's own story is as shallow as a kiddie pool, and I'd like for this video to be longer than 5 minutes. Reason 2 is because I did in fact try to play through the story mode in order to give you an honest evaluation of its most unique feature, an RPG mechanic. As you fight through the great value world warriors on your path to be the best or whatever, you gain stat-ups that make Joe a more competent fighter. But in order to do that, I'd have to best the unbeatable first boss of the game, the asylum demon of power moves, Warren. One would assume this thick-bodied chap is a Glass Joe caliber jobber. He even looks like Gabby J from Super Punch-Out.
Yay!
In a game with minimal mechanics, the first challenge should be a cakewalk where you just get used to the controls. I wouldn't call myself tournament ready by any stretch, but I understand the basics of fighting games, and there's not a lot of depth to power moves in the first place, but... well...
You lose!
Finally, I managed to beat him, thanks in no small part to him literally launching himself into the way of my attack. Here's the level up screen, and here's me getting my ass handed to me immediately afterward by a dancing man wielding castanets. Speaking of which, I've teased this game's characters enough. Let's get into the meat of why we're here. Bare-bones stories about why weird-looking guys from all over the world want to bash each other's brains in. The central conceit of the world of power moves is that more mundane sports like football and football are becoming passé. People want violence, and nobody wants violence more than our main character Joe, who has been secretly training since he was a child to become the greatest fighter in the world. Despite his growing impatience, Joe continues to train until he's approached by an old man who, like an NPC in an NES JRPG, announces apropos of nothing that there are many martial arts masters in the world. This broad statement of fact being offered to him unprovoked by a mysterious octogenarian inspires Joe to travel the world and train under these masters, until he hears word of a champion in the new, fierce, unnamed fighting sport who has kicked all of the asses of all of the greatest fighters. He thinks, that's how I prove I'm the best, beating that guy, and leaves his home in small-town America to do so. Joe is a karate guy who can do an overly dramatic and difficult to aim anti-air kick and shoot a fireball while shouting what sounds like, "Whoa, shit!" Which is probably what I would also shout if I could suddenly unleash flaming spirit energy from my hands. And it makes me think of this comic panel, which makes me laugh. If you beat the game with him, and he's the only one you have the option to, you get blue text on a black background announcing, "You are #1 fighter," before fading into a picture of Joe holding a golden snake corpse aloft with an expression of dull surprise.
Dull surprise!
The manual's a little more well translated than the in-game text, offering the idea that Joe's initial training was getting him nowhere, especially with the appearance of the fighting champion who broke all the records and took what Joe believed to be his spot. The old man also doesn't just shout out facts about the existence of martial artists, but discloses to Joe that there are secret fighting masters, which would have also been a fine name for the game in any region, inspiring Joe to challenge them and learn their deadly moves to become the ultimate champion. Next is the aforementioned terror of the high seas, Warren. He's apparently from Hawaii, and he has seen some shit. In his youth, Warren was the subject of ridicule for his cowardice until he realized he was frighteningly yoked and began to use that strength to solve all his problems. He has this aerial breakdancing move that's objectively terrible and a decent dash which he apparently calls Big Wednesday. Being as he's built like John Silver's dad, it's appropriate he has a very wrestling-inspired fighting style with huge drop kicks and flying elbows. Buo is our next combatant, or if you translate his name from the original Japanese, Dance King. He claims to be a representative of Kabuki theater, but is in fact a direct descendant of assassins from the Boshin War. He's described as having inherited the killing techniques of ninjutsu, kung fu, karate, aikido, and kobudo, which translates into a big kick and a jumping uppercut that's useless against anyone below him. I guess red comes out of him when he attacks, increasing his range a bit. He can teleport backward with a smoke bomb and hit people with his hair, which requires pressing 3 buttons compared to the 1 for his big kick, and has a startup animation and shorter range. At least you fight him on this cool snowy Shinto shrine stage. I dig the parallax. Hailing from China, Gao Luan has some impressive reach and probably the most cromulent move list in the game. He has a strong projectile throwing his twin boomerang daggers which can hit on the return, and a flash kick-like move that feels like a better anti-air than Joe's Supernova by virtue of still being able to hit stuff on the ground. The manual only mentions he's mastered the Northern Chinese fighting style, which is probably meant to indicate why he's so acrobatic and better at striking with his legs. His name might also translate to Gowron, and he seems to have the title 100 Dragons, which is a pretty sick thing to be called if you're just one regular human guy. Next up, she's Rayon in the game, Lee Yong in the manual where her portrait is backward and still bears her in-game name written over it, and Lee Young if you Google translate the original Japanese. But of all the things she is, she's definitely not Chun-Li. Ignore the buns and the similar outfit, ignore the fact that the manual says she was born and raised in China, her stage is in Thailand, see? And she absolutely doesn't have the move diversity of the lightning-kicking Interpol officer. Her shooting down kick is just an upward strike that's awkward to land no matter the situation, though her dash has a few frames afterward where she withdraws from the attack, which I kind of like to get out of danger on a block. Besides, the manual outright states that she's the only female fighter in the world, so not only is she not Chun-Li, but there is no Chun-Li. In fact, no female has ever fought anything before or since Rayon, and if anyone tells you differently, they're a filthy liar. Speaking of people who definitely aren't other people, here's a guy who took zero inspiration from Street Fighter's Blanka, Baraki Chimera. Setting aside the questionable racial sensitivity of 90s Japan, I kind of like his design actually. I like his mohawk and piercings, I like that he's sporting the juiciest of rips, and I dig his color scheme. His normals aren't much to write home about, but his fireball and rolling dash attack are pretty exceptional. Baraki is apparently the leader of the fictitious Kenyan Opa Opa tribe and a member of the secret organization Junk, whatever that means. Another member of Junk, Nick here looks like some kind of badass pirate or street tough on the select screen, but when you get into battle with him, he's a lot more Catholic Piccolo? I really don't know what's going on here. He's supposed to be a matador who impressed Junk with his quick reflexes, but this is only a matador outfit if it was described to the artist via a game of telephone. Similarly, when he wins a match or throws his knives, he shouts "Ole" to drive home his Spanish heritage, only he says it like someone who's never heard the word pronounced before, so it sounds more like "Hold it."
Ole!
You might be asking why Nick throws knives when the traditional weapon of the matador is the short spear, fool that you are. The manual actually covers this, mentioning he discovered he can use knives as well as he can a spear. So there. Nick's other move is a pair of chain capoeira attacks, the traditional means of defeating a bull, and his stage is an endless elevator ascending above a post-apocalyptic city, as you would expect from an expert torero. The final playable character is undoubtedly the one you've all been waiting for, Vagnad Rovnovsky. But keep your snickering to yourself, his name is a mistranslation. It's actually a name with a respected history that I managed to find several instances of with a quick Google search. So, clean the egg off your face and put some respect on the man's true name, Bagnad. Baltesty Skrotovsky hails from Russian, and until recently was a political prisoner forced to fight other prisoners to the death. When the government holding him collapsed, Nutbag Sakovich found the techniques he learned in the fighting pits brought him a new understanding of martial arts. These include a pretty bitchin' spinning lariat, a terrible jumping punch, effortlessly double pile driving someone's skull into the dirt, being blue for no reason, and the dreaded handstand attack, a move which the manual describes but he never performs. Truly, the mysteries of Coin-Pursed Plum Smuglov will stay with us for the rest of time. There's one more character in Power Moves, the final boss who is only playable with a code, the ultimate fighter Joe seeks to test his might against, Rancor. Sadly, as he is the final boss, I have no manual information on him, nor have I managed to find his original Japanese name to know if it was something that makes more sense than Rancor. All I know is that he's also American, Joe's bout against him takes place in front of a crowd of screaming fans, and he's got some pretty decent attacks. The punch wreathed in blue flame is an intimidating spectacle, even though he screams Thunder Beef as he performs it. Thunder Beef! But the pièce de résistance is his floor-crawling projectile, released with a plaintive cry of, I don't understand! Me either, Rancor. Me either. No matter what you call it, this is a very bad game with only an ounce of ambition, and in that way feels like a predecessor to the likes of Criticon. Few will remember this game for its almost unique characters or level-up training system, but many will continue to celebrate its confusing ad with inaccurate hand-drawn screenshots and the fact that it has a guy named Vagnad in it for years to come. Next time on Violent Profiles, we'll dive into the first few games of an Atlas series that also sometimes has power in the title. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like and comment about why. It tells YouTube to promote the show to other people. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and support us on the Patreon at the $5 tier to get new episodes a month early. Shout out to all the names currently on screen for doing exactly that. Until next time, white out.